11 animals. No weapons, no tools, no blueprints. Just teeth, mud, and something ancient buried deep in their instincts. And in less than 15 years, those 11 animals did what entire government agencies, millions in flood defense budgets, and decades of environmental engineering had completely failed to do. They rewrote a nation's rivers. But here's the part nobody talks about. The government didn't even fully plan this. Half of what happened next was completely unauthorized, unsanctioned, almost feral in how it spread. And right now, as you watch this, something is moving through the rivers of Scotland that no policy, no license, and no wildlife manager fully controls anymore. This is the story of Britain's most radical ecological experiment and what it unleashed.
May 28th, 2009, Argyll, Scotland.
A convoy of climate-controlled crates wound through the morning mist of Knapdale forest, and 11 Norwegian beavers who had absolutely no idea they were about to make history. Dr. Bob Bell, veterinary lead for the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, had spent months preparing for this moment. These animals had been captured in Norway's Telemark region, a place where beavers had never disappeared, quarantined at Whipsnade Zoo, screened, tested, cleared, every protocol signed off in triplicate, because what was about to happen had never been done before. This was the first legally licensed mammal reintroduction in British history. Not wolf, not lynx, not bear, beaver. A creature that had been completely extinct in Scotland for over 400 years. At Loch Dew, locals called it Dub Loch, the first crate was opened. A single breeding pair slipped into the dark water, barely a ripple. They were gone in seconds, swallowed by the cold loch, as if the landscape itself had been waiting. The following morning, May 29th, 2 more family groups were released at Loch Calabar, and just like that, the clock started. But here's the question nobody could answer that morning. What would 11 animals, alone in an ecosystem that had forgotten them, actually do? Jill Doust, Programme Manager for the Scottish Wildlife Trust, the woman who had spent over a decade fighting bureaucracy, rejected applications, and angry landowners just to get this trial approved, stood at the water's edge and watched. The first application had been rejected in 2005, full stop. Heritage bodies worried about archaeological sites. Landowners feared flooding. It took until 2008 before the Scottish Government finally issued a licence. And even then, strict conditions, buffer zones, ecological monitoring, a 5-year review clause that could pull the whole thing apart. 15 years of paperwork for 11 animals. But those 11 animals, they got to work immediately. Within weeks, Knapdale's nights filled with a sound Scotland hadn't heard in 4 centuries. The flat crack of a beaver's tail on water. The rasp of incisor teeth through willow and alder. That specific, almost mechanical sound of something being built. Each stick was chosen deliberately, each branch dragged at precise angles. Mud scooped from the loch's edge, packed into gaps, sealed with stones and aquatic plants. What began as a trickle of moving water was, night by night, being transformed into something else entirely. A pond, then another, then a network. Jill Doust's field team documented everything. Freshly chewed stumps, muddy slides carved into the banks, low earthen dams arching across narrow channels that had existed for centuries undisturbed. The beavers weren't adapting to the landscape, they were redesigning it. And what happened next stunned every scientist on the project. Dr. Emma Thompson, a hydrologist from the University of Exeter, arrived in Knapdale with one question burning in her mind. Could a handful of animals actually change what happens when Scotland's storms hit? Her team spent a decade answering it. Over 1,000 storm events tracked, high-frequency water gauges deployed across the catchment, drone surveys, computer models mapping every surge and twist of water through the beaver-engineered channels. The results? In areas where beaver dams had spread across the river catchment, peak flood discharge didn't just decrease, it plunged. In modelled worst-case winter storms, the presence of a full beaver dam network slashed peak water flow by an average of 60%. Field instruments in Knapdale's tributaries recorded flood peaks arriving 2.5 to 3 hours later after beaver colonisation. Water that used to race downhill in a wall of destruction now lingered, absorbed into soil, spread across meadows, filtered through a living sponge of mud and roots. The team validated their models against in situ flow meters across Devon and Scotland. Less than 8% margin of error between prediction and reality. Meanwhile, Britain had spent billions on concrete flood defences over the same decades. 11 animals with nothing but their teeth had quietly done what engineers with budgets couldn't, and nobody was fully prepared for what came next. If this is already blowing your mind, smash that like button, because it gets stranger from here. Within a year of the beavers' arrival, Knapdale was unrecognisable. Where stagnant water had once sat still and lifeless, dragonflies now stitched across mirrored ponds. Water rails, birds that hadn't nested in this region in living memory, called out from reed beds that simply hadn't existed 12 months earlier. Local rangers, some with 30+ years of fieldwork in Argyll, started finding something remarkable along the muddy banks. Burrows, tracks, signs of water voles, a species that had been silently slipping toward regional extinction. Long-term trapping grids told the story in cold numbers. The water vole population index quadrupled within a decade, from just over 1 capture per 100 trap nights to more than 5. Otters returned to hunt the slow, fish-rich water behind the dams. Amphibians colonized the shallow, sun-warmed margins. Reed buntings and sedge warblers staked out territories in dense vegetation that hadn't existed before. Macroinvertebrate richness, the tiny insects, larvae and aquatic life that form the base of the entire food chain, jumped by nearly 80% in beaver-influenced streams. And the water itself changed. Field teams placed turbidity sensors upstream and downstream of active beaver sites. Downstream turbidity, the cloudiness of water carrying sediment and agricultural runoff, fell by 15%. Nitrate concentrations cut by 12%, phosphate by 8%. The beavers had turned the river into a living filtration system. Rangers talked quietly about it, the feeling of standing in these woods now versus before. There was something almost spiritual about it. A landscape that had been described for decades as ecologically dead was now teeming at every level. Something had been returned, but not everything about this return was clean. Here's the part of this story that the official reports don't lead with. While the Knapdale trial was being carefully managed, monitored, regulated, logged, something else was happening 200 miles east. In the early 2000s, Bavarian beavers, not Norwegian, not licensed, not authorized, had begun escaping from private collections across Perthshire. Some say they were deliberate releases. Nobody has ever confirmed it. What's certain is this: by 2012, farmers and anglers on the River Tay's tributaries were finding dam-building families in places no government release had ever touched. No license, no monitoring, no permission. Just beavers, multiplying. One Perthshire landowner, half amused and half exasperated, told a reporter at the time, "We started with a couple of furry immigrants. Now it's like a beaver boomtown out there." By 2024, Nature Scott's national survey, using field transects, camera traps, and genetic sampling, confirmed the Scottish beaver population had exceeded 2,000 animals. The Tay Basin alone held more than 150 family groups, from 11 to 2,000 in 15 years. Projections from the 2024 management report suggest Scotland could hold 10,000 beavers by the end of this decade. They are not waiting for permission. They are rewriting the rules. But as the population exploded, so did the conflict. Fisheries manager Rob Needham still remembers the first time his team found a run of spring salmon completely halted by a fresh beaver dam on an Argyll burn. The fish, stacked in the pool below the dam, circled for days, unable to reach their spawning beds, a species that had survived ice ages, stopped by a wall of sticks. For rivers like the Shochy Burn, where one dam had covered a purpose-built fish pass, intervention was the only option. Each call-out carried a price. By recent calculation, the mean cost per beaver flood incident has settled at £1,180, manageable for a single case, but compounding fast as the population expands. The answer turned out not to be destruction, it was surgery. Dam notching, cutting a narrow 30cm gap through the dam's centre, restores fish passage without demolishing what the beaver built. Trials on the River Isla showed 94% of tagged salmon smolts successfully navigated notched dams. Quick, surgical, effective. By 2024, the management approach had transformed entirely. Lethal control, once the default response, had fallen from 87 licensed removals in 2021 to just 23. Relocation stepped in to fill the gap. In 2023 alone, 79 beavers were rehomed in new catchments, cutting local conflict incidents by 2/3. And on the genetics side, the original Knapdale beavers, all Norwegian, showed dangerously low genetic diversity. So in 2018, and again in 2024, Bavarian origin beavers were deliberately introduced, nearly quadrupling genetic diversity within the population. The next scheduled assessment, 2029. Scotland is no longer just managing a reintroduction, it is managing a nation's relationship with a species that never asked for permission to come back. From 11 animals released on a grey Scottish morning in May 2009, to 2,000 beavers actively reshaping 6 major river catchments across a nation. Floods softened, voles returned, water cleaned, salmon blocked, fields flooded, ecosystems reborn. The beaver didn't come back as a guest, it came back as an architect. And the question Scotland is still trying to answer, the same one every country watching this experiment has quietly started asking, is this: when you return something to nature that nature has been missing for 400 years, who's really in control? The policy, the license, the management plan, or the mud and the sticks and the teeth that never forgot what they were for? If this story hit different, and honestly, how could it not? Do one thing right now. Hit subscribe, because this channel exists to find exactly these stories, the ones that sound impossible until you look at the numbers, and then suddenly, nothing about the world makes sense the same way again. Share this with someone who needs to see it. Drop your thoughts below, because the beavers aren't done yet, and neither are we.